Philip. I'm with Asure Software. Some of you may formerly know us as PeopleCube. We sold the company 4 months ago to Asure as a public company in the NASDAQ marketplace. All is going well, thank you. It's always interesting coming. I speak at a lot of conferences, and particularly IFMA and Coronet, and this is the most thought-provoking conference that I think goes on the real estate industry. So I want to congratulate Philip and the team. Also, just following up on some of the commentary earlier, Jeremy talked about the 60-40. To add another thought idea around that, we've talked about food and we talked about nutrition and wellness with Scott. I went to a conference last month, and they talked about that the aging population. We talk about boomers and people retiring, but on this earth, with all the change in medical technology, they believe that the first person to live to be 150 has already been born. That's a scary thought. I don't want to be that person. So I want to talk to you about data and how it affects the workplace. You heard from the panel. I'm going to kind of follow up on the panel's conversation with a live case study, but how to use the data to make it. People have talked about the real estate and the office of yesteryear. It was very transactional, very centralized. You came to the office. It was task-oriented with people meeting face-to-face. And that's all changed. Technology didn't really enable that over the last couple of decades. Someone showed the old phones. I have one of those kids that looked at me with a rotary dial the other day when we downsized from our house into a condo and goes, "What's that, Dad?" And he's 30 years old. So, the technology has raced ahead. And how do we use that? We use that in a much more centralized, I'm jumping ahead too fast. So we use that in a very decentralized way. Technology has really enabled us. So a lot of the things that we're talking about today has allowed us to change the workforce. How many use WebEx or GoToMeeting on a daily or weekly regular basis? Raise your hand. A lot in the room. People are using video conferencing. How many people are using video conferencing? 3 years ago, you wouldn't have gotten the room to raise, half their hands. So, technology has really driven us to this distributed environment. You talk about the panel. Technologies enable us to be really race ahead and go to a co-working or a variable workspace model. And I want to, talk to you about how to do that and what companies are doing. And if I go, so there's a whole industry, as you saw here from the panel a few minutes ago, that has been built, and it's racing ahead over the last 2 or 3 years, not only here in Europe, but in the across the pond in the U.S. And so companies are quickly evaluating and moving to this variable workspace or co-working, whatever definition you want to see. There's a lot of money being pumped in by the venture capital community into these spaces. So you look at what just happened here in London with what Pierre pointed out. There's a number of places that are spending quite a bit of money to kit out a place and make it available. And they're not just 2,000 or 3,000 square feet. They're 10, 15, 20,000. And you look at Regis, who's one of the largest providers in here. So as an industry, this has evolved. And there are a number of companies, and I'm labeling some here in Europe, but some are global, that have emerged from this investment. And it's continuing to grow rapidly. And it's to service the corporates and these entrepreneurial companies that are forming and starting up to service that demand. If there wasn't a demand, there wouldn't be this servicing model that's coming out. And you heard different types of models that are being evolved. Regis being the largest and one of the early adopters in the marketplace. I want to compare the real estate industry to an industry we're all familiar with, and it's the airline industry. And the mobile worker has been flying around and generating a lot of traffic, and both internally to their organization, but also from an airline point of view. And the mobile workforce is going to grow to over 37% IDC claims. So now if we think about that, that's a lot of people. And if we multiply that by all the real estate, are we really going to spend 1.3 trillion pounds or dollars in real estate in 5 years? I would hazard a guess not. So how are we going to deploy real estate or variable workspace to that? And looking at the average square footage per employee, back in the early 2000s, it was around 300 square feet. This data is from Coronet and IFMA. If you look in, as the recession hit, it went up. Why? Because we have a lot of fixed lease space that we can't get out of, or space that we own, and we reduced our number of employees. But now the trend, you heard today, 110, 120 square feet per employee. You know, companies are, particularly corporates that we deal with, are really trying to drive that number down to 150 or less. And so the trend is driving down. So how do we capture that? In comparing ourselves, you know, to the airline industry, if you look back 10 years ago, each airline had the same type of plane for any route they flew. Didn't matter whether it was a short haul plane across the continent or an international flight, and they were way under capacity, much like we have in our real estate portfolio today. Real estate is underutilized in corporate world across the world. So, you know, how do we measure that? If I stayed at 60% of my manufacturing capacity or my airline capacity, I'd be out of business today. So what did they do? They had to take advantage of how to grow their passenger traffic. So they've been steadily growing their passenger traffic, been a lot of consolidation in the industry, which is also going on in the corporate world, a lot of consolidation in a lot of the markets that we serve. But they've been growing that passenger traffic 10% a year. And how do they do that? They do that by taking every piece of data they have on us and analyzing it very precisely. They know when we fly. They know when we don't show up. They know when the cancellations are. They know what the seasonal patterns are. What do they do with that information? They resize their aircraft. They figure out what ticket prices they can charge us. If they're oversold for a flight and there's a few seats less, they raise the price at the, you know, as you get closer to the time period. If you are undersold and I want to sell more seats, then I send it out to the brokers and I discount it. So they're taking that data and figuring out what to do with that. And what did they do? They reconfigured their space, no different than us from a real estate or facilities point of view. They figured out what type of aircraft I want to have, what's profitable to be on that route, what's the capacity of that route. You know, how many of them been on an airplane where, you know, there's 30 empty seats in the last year or so? Raise your hand. A few. You know, I came over from Boston on Sunday, and you know, they're reducing capacity. You know, they reduced it by a third. American Airlines just dropped their flight because it's been half empty, they tell me. So, you know, they're constantly analyzing that data to ensure that they can make a profit. They don't offer the same classes of seats on all flights. You know, if you, in regional flights here in Europe or in the US, you know, there is no first class, there is no business class. It might even be a propeller plane, much that people would shudder to hop on it. But you see a lot of prop planes for regional flights that I take in the States. They can't afford the jet fuel. It's more efficient for them. So they've analyzed that data. They don't offer a first class seat. You come over here and you get a first class business and an economy coach because I have enough capacity and I have enough of a volume from my passenger community that I can fill that plane. But you know, I'm not offering the same size plane, the same type of plane, or the same class of service. It's all about data. So how do we move our portfolio as a real estate? And I want to walk you through how we capture some of those things. You know, people are capturing data in a lot of different ways. And no one way or method is the panacea to your data collection opportunity here. But IP detection, people have been trying to do that, and if you have a good relationship with IT, then companies do get it done. They are also looking at kiosks. You go to an airport, you're seeing kiosks inside of lobbies. You're seeing kiosks as you come off elevators. We talked about knowing how to collaborate. Where can I find my coworker in the building when I come in as a mobile worker? I want to figure out that person. I can type in his name or her name, and it'll show me the seat on a floor plan, and I can go there. People are trying to use the cell phone, you know, mobile technology, smartphones, have Wi-Fi and GPS. If your external, you know, GPS is good, Wi-Fi is just coming of age inside of a building. You can't really get your GPS, but people are wanting to know where you are in the building so that I can figure out how to collaborate. Or if you're in the building, you know, we talked about food today. Cafeterias are big meeting places, but they're also huge real estate expenses for you all in corporate America. Is it being used? What's it being used? How much is it being used? Should I put technology in there? A lot of things that you can evaluate, you know, from that perspective. There's occupancy and presence detection. How many people know that you are being tracked in and out of this building today? Well, we put sensors over in those rooms so we know how many people went in and out of every room. what are sensors good for? Sensors are good for, it doesn't require the employee to do anything for you to capture that data. It's kind of like the airline. I booked a reservation, I get my data. So we have sensors overhead that we are tracking you, and we know how many people went in and out of every room by the minute. If you go to the grocery store, this technology has been around for 25 years. Go to Waitrose, go to Wembley Stadium, and look up. You've been getting tracked for years, you just don't know it. So you think the internet's been capturing your data, your consumer behavior has been getting tracked for years. And it came out of Europe from the defense system, actually, 30 years ago is where this technology originated from. So we've been getting tracked for years. Why do you think they know when it takes 18 minutes when you walk into a Waitrose in a grocery store, and I'm going to come out the back end, I need to put more cashiers up there because 40 people went in? They don't have to call cashiers, they know because it went to their handheld to say, get more cashiers because 40 people came in, we're going to need 3 more cashiers here because they're going to be checking out. Badge reading data, collect that with security badge data today. And some of the newer things that are coming out are biometric technology. Why? Highly accurate. Because I could be tag along in a security badging system. I could be putting my badge in, and I leave the door open, and 3 more people came in behind me. I don't know they're there. I tie that to my turnstile with a biometric or even facial recognition software. Soon speech recognition tied into both of those. It's 100% accuracy. It's highly secure. So again, I can get accurate data counts. I know where you were in the building, and I can understand the utilization from them. So I want to walk through a case study. This is a customer, a large bank, who was trying to increase their growth of people, but reduce their, or not grow their portfolio. The goal was flat. If we could reduce, great, but the real goal was to keep it flat with growing my headcount. So took a traditional office. It was 148 people. It's like the office of yesteryear. Every person had a cubicle, whether they came to the office or not. And the blue space is the we space. It's the conference room space. So all the rest was, the orange tan was the cubicle space. So what they did is we put in some sensor technology, and they analyzed the use of cubicles. So on the bottom is the row of cubicles. And if you look at the red bar, it's less than 25% utilized. You look at the gray bar, it's a little better, more of a mobile worker probably. The green bars are more of a permanent or a team environment. Look at it in a more traditional sense, take the same data and overlay it on top of a floor plan. Now I really understand who's using what space or what type of space and how long. So a lot of people do bed checks, but it doesn't tell me how long someone sat in here. And for a mobile worker, when you come to the office, you're here to collaborate. You're not really there to sit in a cubicle unless I'm working in a team environment and we need to do a group setting. I'm dropping my bag and going somewhere else. So, I need to understand the actual duration that someone's cheeks were in a seat. And so I can really understand how I can redeploy that and repurpose that space. So if you take that same and you work with gentlemen like that spoke this morning about re-architecting the space or repurposing the space, you take that same square footage, you didn't increase it, and now you're able to put 260 people physically in that space. You improve the collaboration or the we space, and you decrease the dedicated cubicles to almost nothing. And in fact, I would say that people talk about ratios, 1 to 1, 1.2 to 1, 1.3 to 1. I'd say in 70% of the cases, everyone does much better over the course of time because the adoption rate will increase. So if you start at 1.2, you can get to, 2 to 1, 2.5 to 1. Another bank, had a goal of 2 to 1. They're at 7 to 1. So it depends upon the culture. You heard a lot about all these things today. I'd say it boils down to one word: culture. Because your company has a culture. Philip likes to talk about Google. Well, they have a Google culture. They want you to come to the office. That's by design. There are other companies, that's not my culture. And, one size doesn't fit all. I think Barry said it right. Take the innovationness out of what you hear in these conferences and see how you can apply it to how you work inside your culture. Because that's what drives this type of change management that has to go on inside a company. Someone else brought up the 80-20 rule. We do the 80-20 rule in our company, particularly in my engineering group, because they're the geeks and they like to do things on the internet and check out new technologies. And what we do is we give them 3 days, once a quarter, and you can spend that time doing anything you want, design anything you want. Personal, we try to sell them off doing anything business-wise. And then over the weekend, on Monday morning, the only requirement is you have to come in and demonstrate to the management team what you did during your time. Over 50% of the time, they either fix a problem that's been around for years in our products, not something personal, or they build something new that they've always wanted to do, and we end up putting it in the product probably 80% of the time. So even though you said, go do something personal, you'll be surprised what your workers will do. So whether I'm in the financial services business or the technology business, someone could be creating new innovative financial products if I'm in the financial services. So what people do will surprise you when you say personal, because I saw the shudder in the audience. You know, people worry about, and it's really this generation, my generation, I'm 54, that is the problem with the whole mobile worker millennia. I got a 31-year-old kid, worked for me for the last 7 years, quit 2 months ago, sold everything, his cars, everything, and he's traveling around Europe for the next 4 months, and he's moving to Australia next month for 3 years with his girlfriend, who's 29. So they think differently than we do, but they want that flexibility. You go into these offices, they want to know. It's the number 2 item when they look at jobs, besides salary. They want to know they don't have to go to an office every day. So it's really about the people. You can reduce your real estate costs in this thing, but I would submit to you that don't overlook the people, because the people is the number 1 cost you have in all your companies. And to replace a person is about 150 to 250% of their annual salary. So attracting and retaining talent to fill the jobs that we need is going to be our biggest ongoing problem, no matter what we set up as an office. And so we need to think about how that fits into our culture. So I want to talk about just, what I view, and you heard it from the panel, it's going on today. I'd say it's going on in the States a little more than it is in Europe. I don't want to offend anyone, but some cultures in Europe, when I get the promotion to the next level, director, oh, but that job comes with the corner office and the glass window. I'm not giving that up. You owe that to me. I've been here 14 years. You owe me that. So U.S., we're not as, we're a right-to-work society. We don't have employment contracts, like 22 pages for my assistants here in the U.K. We have a 1-page offer letter. You sign it, and it's a right work. You can leave, and I can fire you. It's a little different environment. So I think we have a little different culture of how we view some of those things, and the flexibility and not having to commute is a big benefit. We hotel, before I sold the company, we were 63 people, and we hotel about 1/3 of our company, and they work 2 or 3 days a week. I would say, as a middle management or a white collar in the age bracket of baby boomer, you have all the ability to track what your employees do. I know what my best engineer, most people don't even know. He lives in Scotland. His boss has never met him in 7 years, when I bought the company here in the UK 7 years ago. He's my most productive engineer. He checks in his code every night. It doesn't break. I don't have to rework it. And I know exactly what he did every day. So there's all kinds of internet technology that's available for you to measure and track workers. It doesn't have to be, I got to see my employee to think they're working. That notion we got to clear out of our minds. And it's a problem with your HR people. They think the same way. Why is HR not helping you try to solve this problem? They're saying, I do compensation, I do recruitment, I do 401ks if you're in the US. So I want to submit, the old classic workspace is dying. The fixed model is dying. The big dots are corporate or big facilities, little dots are regional, and we're going to this variable model. Headquarters are being reduced or downsized. There's a variable model in between, or a collaborative model that says I'm creating more we space. Bank in Charlotte, won't name the name. Corporate headquarters in the center of the city. Everyone came there, figured out it was only being used 63%. They created north, south, east, west around the perimeter, dropped their real estate 22%, cut their employees' traffic commute by 50%. Everyone's happy. Get more productivity, make happier. you get 75% of your employees' commute time back in work. You get up and shower. You have habits that are there for years. You get up and shower. You do your regular routine. You get it all back. So we've been doing this in the manufacturing business. The airline industry is doing it. We need to think about our just-in-time office space. If you have the data, you can be, you looked at the designs. You can roll things around. We do a lot of combo rooms or changing. You have facilities, people come in and change it. It takes a half an hour to go change things. So thank you.
Inside.